Welcome to the Oshow Scandal Panel. I'm Laura Babcock, and joined as we always are when we need to be by two excellent former journalists. Keith Leslie from Queen's Park days. We all know Keith. I think he knows Queen's Park better than anybody else. And Mark Cripps, who was not only a journalist, but also did communications inside of the Ministry of Housing and has been amazing on the entire Ford scandal since the Greenbelt broke. But just before we get into all the things I want to talk about, including Ford stacking the courts and quadrupling down on that kind of U.S. MAGA style policy. I was wondering if I was watching Donald Trump or Doug Ford this past week. But also, there's the 413 nonsense, getting rid of the environmental protections, the Staples scandal, which keeps getting bigger and bigger, still gross things around the Greenbelt, trying to get some of that land back. And let's not even forget about healthcare and what an absolute collapse it is. Now, there have been some wins against Ford. There have been some court cases that have said, no way, we're not going down like this in Ontario. We're not ready for an autocrat. We're still fighting. So we will get into all of that with our panel. But before we do, just a programming note. There is a big scandal happening in Hamilton, and that is in a city with an affordability and a homeless crisis, which is out of control. We had City Council on a vote, one vote, over the line to keep a parking lot over affordable housing, which is bananas because there's no rationale for it other than maybe some horse trading and some NIMBYism. And if we don't nip this vote in the bud, we're going to end up having councillors right across our city block affordable housing, which puts our urban boundary in the Greenbelt back at risk and is also a horrible message to send to the 10,000 people in our city who are desperate for that housing. We just found out today there's not a house you can get in Hamilton for under $500,000. So we are going to have Graham Crawford back on the show. I'll sneak one more in before I go away on a bit of a vacation, because we need to hear Graham Crawford on the latest on the parking over people scandal happening here in Hamilton. Okay, guys, let's do what we always do. I'm going to go to the veteran journalist at Queen's Park. I listed just some of the scandals I want to jump into, Keith, but you're the guy with the reporter's notebook. So what do you want to talk about first on the scandal panel?
Well, I guess today the most obvious one that seems to really grab people's attention was this: "I want like-minded judges," said Premier Ford. Well, what government under an RCMP investigation wouldn't want like-minded judges or judges he handpicks? At first, I thought perhaps he was just saying the quiet part out loud. I mean, we know that previous premiers and attorneys general have had hands in the selection of judges. But he went further than that, not only appointing two former staffers from his own office to the committee that appoints these judges, one of them a lobbyist for the gun registry. I mean, where on earth are we going with this? We know that, the prime minister has to appoint judges, as does the premier, and we know that both of them are behind on this. But to see this, where a premier comes right out and says, I'm not going to appoint a liberal or a new Democrat. You're supposed to appoint the best qualified people to be judges. This is what we all want. We would expect that most of them would have a law degree. Many of them, especially federal ones, would be bilingual. But beyond that, the criteria should be for the best legal minds that we can get. And that's not what we're getting. We're getting politicized. We want PC judges. Well, no, we don't. Canadians do not want to see us go down that road that we see with the American, right to the Supreme Court level. Or basically, once Trump was able to stack the courts, we know every decision the court is going to make ahead of time because it's so politicized. This is exactly the kind of thing we don't want to see here. And as you say, the premier didn't just double down on it and triple down on it. In the legislature again, he said, I quadrupled down on this.
No,
Why? What on earth would you?
because
It's
they
just
have
so blatantly partisan. And it's, as I say, it's just the wrong message. And, I'm not a legal mind by any stretch of the imagination, but those people in the legal community, they are really outraged at this. They see this as just, way beyond the normal encroachment by a government, trying to make some selections or suggestions to handpicking political partisans to be judges. That's just a step way too far, and calls the whole fairness of the judiciary into question.
Hence my term, we're not ready for an autocrat yet there, Ford. A majority based on 18% is not a real majority. Technically, he has one. And so I think he's swinging for the fences on every possible advantage that he and his wealthy cronies can get, including stacking the courts so that all the stuff that his government has been doing that's been corrupt and malfeasance and maybe even nefarious and maybe even illegal. We'll find out. Of course, you want to stack the courts if you're doing everything else that he's trying to get away with, Mark. But the fact of the matter is, what we're seeing in the U.S. when they have a right-wing court is terrifying. It's eroding the rights of people in the United States. And we could go on and on about how bad things are getting down there, or we can just say, let's not do it here. What was your reaction when you saw him Trump-like quadrupling down on a terrible autocratic idea?
Well, I think the biggest problem with this whole story is the appointment of two staffers to a process that, by all reviews, has worked very well since it was created. I believe in the 90s, and has received, it's never been a problem before. There's never been these kinds of accusations. But when you put partisan political staffers on the panel that is selecting judges, I think that's where I think a lot of people drew the line. And I think it, like he said, it really sends a chilling effect to anybody who has recently been appointed, because now it's like, well, now everybody's going to think I'm just in Doug Ford's pocket. And I'm really confused by this. It doesn't have to be this way. And I know a lot of people say, well, everybody does it. Okay. And that I think a lot of that comes from the federal and the Trump and the sort of the U.S. System. We all think that this is what governments do. They put their own people in power. But I'm just going to tell you my experience, okay? Because I spent 8 years at Queen's Park, and I'm not saying it was perfect, but I remember, yes, there were definitely people, and this is no secret, people in who help parties, who are involved in parties, often get some plum positions within various boards and agencies. But I look back to the time that I was there, where we put David Crombie in charge of the Greenbelt panel. David Crombie was never a liberal the last time I checked. When we made appointments to the Hamilton Police Board, a lot of the people that were appointed to the police board are well-known conservatives in this community.
Yeah.
But that didn't stand in the way of picking the right people. And I think, to single out, I don't want any NDP or liberal people. This is the worst kind of politics that you can possibly, to demonize your opponents in a way that makes them feel like they're soft on crime. Everybody wants all levels of government to get tough on crime. The people that get tough on crime are the most competent people. And I think we're going to have another one of these situations where civil liberties unions and other groups are going to challenge this appointment process. It's going to get bogged down. We're going to spend more dollars defending this in legal cases. And really, I'm just perplexed at what the rationale for coming out and quadrupling down on this, as Keith said,
yeah.
To the government.
This very same weekend, we saw Trump come out and say they don't want anybody in the Republican Party who isn't full MAGA, right? Like 100% authoritarian.
Get rid of the Romneys.
Yeah, get rid of the Romneys, get rid of anybody who's going to challenge his absolute authority, right? So the idea of having political staffers in the selection process for powerful judges, the whole thing reeks. It reeks like the marching of authoritarianism policies we're seeing in the US right now, and I'm not overstating it. It is fascism that Trump is trying to do. And in Ontario, I am not calling Ford a fascist. What I'm saying is, when you decide that you're going to override the democratic norms and principles and conventions, that you're going to invoke a notwithstanding clause when it shouldn't be invoked, and thank goodness we stood up against that, when you're going to try to take land that you promised you wouldn't take out of protection so that a few of your buddies can make billions, we were able to at least stop some of that. The point is, we're going to see a court challenge to what he's trying to do with the judges. But Keith, is it not just a fire hose of attempts to take control, to fund the wealthy, to privatize the province? I mean, if he keeps paying off his pals are going to keep paying into his election coffers. And until he's got any kind of real competition, possibly in a blue liberal like Bonnie Crombie, he's going to get away with this shit unless we stand up to him. I had Mike Schreiner on from the Green Party last week. People should check out that Oshow. And I said to him, like, what's it going to take for us to stop this premier. And he's like, everyone's going to have to get out there, like healthcare, like education, and protest. I mean, that's what Ontario is looking like now, Keith, is a giant protest.
We see a government that, with each piece of legislation that it knows is basically wrong, it includes a clause where you can't sue us for it. We're going to exempt ourselves from future lawsuits, which again, that itself will be challenged. But it's just ludicrous. They know what they're doing is in violation of basic laws or common sense or regulations or business practices that have been enacted forever around here. I mean, this 95-year lease to the Austrian spa, we've talked about that so many times. Just no transparency whatsoever in this. A government just acting by fiefdom to give a giant chunk of Toronto waterfront away, exempting itself from most environmental regulations and trying to exempt itself from even more. Well, the 413, we need a new highway up there, despite the fact the 407 is half empty half of the time. We're going to proceed with this because, well, our developer friends and our construction industry friends, they really need us to keep this economy going by driving ahead with this project that we're just going to exempt ourselves from the environmental rules on it and anything else we can do. And with the Greenbelt, we're trying to get some of that.
They invested in land along that highway in very same ways that we're seeing the parcels of land that were trying to be pulled out of the Greenbelt. And the fact of the matter is, study after study have said for 2 years now that if we can just move truck traffic onto the 407 and not charge them a fee for that, subsidize the truckers, our goods movement, free up the 401 to get anywhere. If you drive on the 401 like I do, it's a nightmare, right? So they get the trucks on the 407. We don't need the 413. Nobody believes it any more than we believe we needed McMansions on the freaking Greenbelt. The housing, and the, traffic argument for the 413, they don't pass the sniff test in this province. And part of what I think frustration is, guys, so much, I'll go back to you, Keith, because you have something else to say, is that there's an exhaustion factor here, right? I mean, one of the things that autocrats like to use is the concept that they're both invincible and inevitable. So they do more and more and more, so you feel like there's nothing you can do about it, and they make themselves feel like they've got so much momentum. And I called out one of his bullshit videos this weekend, and I said, you've had no competition, really, for a former Ford voter to vote for yet. So your poll results mean squat until we see what the Liberals can put together before the next election. And the idea that you're meeting the values of Ontarians, that's not true, Premier Ford. The people of Ontario care about healthcare access. We care about our taxes not going to pay for your private pals' parking garages and triple costs on our nursing agencies. And we care about people in long-term care and families with autism. And we care about our environment. And we care about our children's access to legitimate college and universities. We care about so many things that you are not only not addressing, you seem like you are deliberately trying to endanger. And that's got people tired, but pissed off at a level I've never seen, guys. Go ahead, Keith.
We've also seen them really screw up their major file, the housing file. I mean, they've screwed it up so badly. And now we have them running around talking about attainable homes, not affordable, attainable. And they cannot give a definition of attainable or affordable because they're going to be McMansions on Greenbelt property or whatever. Is just ludicrous. They're just throwing words out that they admit they have no definition for. They're just using it to fill up space because it sounds good. And if you repeat it often enough, it'll get in use. And then all of a sudden, we're all talking about attainable homes. Well, here's one thing we found out that they're using for attainable homes to meet their target. Every long-term care bed is now an attainable new home. I think it was The Onion put up the thing, young couple finally afford its first long-term care bed. That's where we're at. Come on, that is not solving the housing crisis. It might indeed solve a situation that does need resolving, which is more long-term care beds. But that is not a new home in the sense that anyone in the real world would consider a new home. Okay, it's Mark, just political bullshit.
Mark, two things. So before you go, two things I've got to ask you, okay? One is this idea of attainable housing. Obviously, it's a euphemism. It's a slimy little word to try to get off the fact that there's nothing affordable that they're even planning on building, right? And we all know that to see that, and you can certainly address that from your time in the Ministry of Housing. But I'm going to put you on the spot right now, my friend, because you worked with Ted McMeekin. He was the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and he is one of the people who has voted against affordable, real, not attainable, affordable housing in our community. Any ideas on why the hell that is? And then go on with the rest of the whatever.
I think a lot of it is more And I think it goes back to this, the pre-amalgamation rift that exists in this community, where you have, suburban councillors who are gathering together to fight this type of infringement in their communities. And I think, I'm perplexed at Ted's vote. I'm perplexed at a lot of them vote. A lot of these progressives I thought would be more, um, you know, open-minded on council have, retreaded back to, their parochial,
Let's not muddy the
take
waters. Let's not muddy the waters. The former Minister of Housing,
right.
in the Wynne government is the deciding vote against building desperately needed affordable housing in our community. The other progressives on council voted against it. It was an 8-8 vote with one over the line, and that person over the line was Ted McMeekin. So I'm not going to muddy
Yeah.
those waters. But please go back
No,
to Ford's failure on all things housing.
no, you know what, Laura? I'm not giving Ted a free pass here. So, I mean, I am really shocked. I am really shocked as somebody who, spent a lot of his career fighting for affordable housing, and talking about affordable housing, and talking about how homes first is a most integral public policy thing that we can do. It is perplexing. Back to Ford, though, I just want to point out that this judicial thing, if you notice the way this government operates, whenever they want to deflect our attention away from things that they're trying to get done nefariously in the background, like, for example, their omnibus bill, which will basically undo a lot of the municipal land boundary designations that were reversed and now are being thrown back in. So, what gets people going more than this judicial topic, right? Pointing judges, and we all spend all this time talking about it and being all, and they know very well this thing will be challenged and it'll never come to fruition. But it keeps us occupied. It keeps us looking at something while we're not looking at the other things, like all the things you just mentioned, like rural hospitals that are closed, that are unable to provide services to their community, like homeless people in the street, like paving over the Greenbelt, like building a highway that we don't need. All of we get, because these issues are very fun. These judicial things. It speaks to the very core of what we believe in a democracy, which is a proper, fair justice system. Now Ford can get us all distracted in us thinking that he's going to stack the deck like Trump, and it's very effective because it gets everybody's attention away. So that really keeps lingering in my mind, is that we're all being played here, and I really think we're being played.
Maybe we're being played, but we're not. I'm not being played. Are you being played? I sure as hell am
I'm
mentioning
not
a litany of disgusting things that this government is
played.
trying to do.
Being played is what I'm trying to say. Everybody, focus on the core issues that we need to fight for. This one is never going to see the light of day. Let's get back. Let's not let them throw these things in our way. These little stumbling blocks where we got to pay attention to that, right? Like,
Okay, fair. So what's the core issues? We've got protecting the urban boundary in the Greenbelt, and we can see with this omnibus bill, they're going to try to deregulate their environmental assessments so that they can build this 413, so that they can do the Ontario Place thing without any kind of scrutiny. So I mean, that's a major thing. The fight for the Greenbelt and our environment is still at risk and is still important. But our healthcare, to your point, I mean, rural ERs are closing. People don't have access. Like and the state of our long-term care is disgusting. Autism families are being treated terribly. I mean, so let's prioritize. Keith, on the scandal panel, what do you have next on your docket?
Nurse practitioner-led clinics that this government will not say are illegal because they're not doctors charging for services. Nurse practitioners cannot bill OHIP, but they can bill you directly $70 to $80 to $90 for a visit, or $400 for the year, $300 for your kids, and we'll take you in as many visits as you need to see. This is called two-tier healthcare, private healthcare. It's exactly what's not supposed to happen in Canada, and this government refuses to shut it down. They keep saying, well, you shouldn't have to pay for OHIP-funded stuff, but these are nurse practitioners. They know it's a loophole. Simply pass a regulation that says nurse practitioner-led clinics must follow the same rules as the Canada Health Act and not bill people for services covered by their provincial health insurance plans. This is disgusting. And it's
But why
just
on earth
such
would they do that? I mean, isn't one of the former premier's wives running a nursing agency? I mean, like, I'm just,
absolutely.
and they own
And
LTCs,
this billing of the nursing agencies, they're paying 3 to 4 or 5 times what they're paying for their regular nurses. We're being poached off. And at the same time, just another example of the same bullshit going on in the healthcare system.
Mhm.
Shoppers Drug Mart realized that it can get paid $75 for every med check call. This used to be something a pharmacist would decide, Mrs. O'Leary's got 4 or 5 meds here. I better call and make sure she's taking the right ones and that they're balancing, not affecting her okay. They're phoning people in their 20s, women who might be on the pill and have one other medication. Are you okay? People who do not need to be called, but it used to be the pharmacist made this decision, and they're telling us now corporate headquarters is telling the shoppers pharmacists, call these people, call them up. We need to maximize our revenue from this. In other words, there's $75 a call we can have there. No, it's meant to be for people who need it. No, they're going to do it for everyone and maximize their profits. It's this government, again, just signing a contract. To hell with the unintended consequences, as long as our buddies are going to make money. And our buddies at Shoppers and Loblaw, they're not getting enough. For God's sakes, when I wanted to buy my Presto card, the senior Presto card, I went to the TTC at Yonge and Bloor. I went to the headquarters, and the woman in the booth said, no, you got to go to Shoppers and give them $6 to get your. I said, can't you sell me one? She said, no. Go to Shoppers and get my $6 transit card. Why do shoppers get sick? Like all these little nickel, $6 isn't a lot. Well, it is to shoppers when they can rack up every senior on it with the Presto Pass, and there's $75 for every person who has 2 or more medications. And it's insane, and this government is doing nothing to stop it. But these nurse practitioner-led clinics, they've got to do something and quickly about that, and it can be done very quickly with a simple regulation.
If you want to, unless you're
If
profiting
you
from
want
it,
to,
where
if
your
you have no
pals or your
desire.
donors are. And so, I mean, I got to give credit to Nick Sergis. He watches, of course, the Oshow, and it was Health Watch that broke that story about the Shoppers Drug Mart thing. And so I want to give credit to anyone who's doing that kind of journalism, because as we're seeing corporate journalism being crushed down, when I see someone independently in journalism trying to find the truth in these things, and then everybody else, a landslide, I think, or something, Nick called it, the ball got rolling, happy to share. The point is, we need to continue to find these things, because you know what? It can be overwhelming. To hear what you just said, it drives me bananas, because it's all been planned. It's all on purpose. It's why we saw all those donors through those private colleges all donated to Ford. I mean, the whole thing is one big gigantic, it feels like a Ponzi scheme, but it's one big gigantic grift on the people of Ontario. And you know what? They got voted in democratically. We get what we vote for, or don't show up and vote against, guys. So you know what it is, and we've got to fight back against it. But I think it's important to talk about each of these things, because what took down Capone? His taxes, right? I'm not saying that Ford is Capone. I'm saying when somebody looks like they are invincible, that they can't get taken down about anything, Teflon Don, any of these guys, even Trump with his giant findings against him in civil litigation that he can't pay for. I mean, you can get to people with sometimes the small things, an E.G. Carroll, a tax violation, right? So we can't get to the point where we think that there's too much, nothing can happen. People make mistakes, right? There were mistakes in the Greenbelt that exposed all of this. They hadn't had that stupid Stag and Doe, we probably wouldn't have found out about the Greenbelt. We wouldn't have had the AG's investigations. We wouldn't know what they're doing with Ontario Place, and on the ball rolls. Mark.
Yeah, I mean, is a lot of this lining up for the next election? And I wonder if, especially on things like housing, if the government will move to sort of make housing the core of its campaign, and use that as a if they win, use that as validation that they are able to go and do whatever they want. I think they kind of got caught they've been getting caught more and more and more as they try to do things. And that speaks to what you just said. Like, people are aware of what's going on. Not everybody's falling asleep. And I know it's easy to say that everybody's just kind of like, still worried about other issues in their life, but people are aware of what's going on. The media has been way more better at scrutinizing for government and pushing them on their decisions, because the Greenbelt really was the sort of open the books on the Ford government, and now the media is questioning every single little thing, and we're seeing all of these things exposed. The things that Keith just talked about, the nursing clinics, and the things that are being exposed because the public is now paying attention. So how do they still seem like they're high in the polls? I don't know. I don't put a lot of faith in polls 2 years before an election.
Well, there's no competition.
So,
If I voted for Ford, I'm
and
not going to vote for Merritt Stiles, no matter how great she is, or for Mike Schreiner, no matter how great he is, because there's nowhere to put that protest vote against Ford right now for people who legitimately want to vote for something. So, Bonnie gets in her by-election, gets in there. Let's see what they can come up with. They've certainly had long enough time to watch and see. And if someone can't take this government out at the knees, then they're not doing a very good job in politics, because
right.
truly, the Overton window has moved on Doug Ford. People don't trust you anymore, Premier, and they don't trust your PC government. And we have ample evidence, but more than just the evidence, if we want to ignore that, we have the experience of the cruelty of your programs and your policies almost in every part of our lives now. And we're not going to forget that because you give us a $200 break on some stupid license plate sticker next time. So they're in trouble. They know they're in trouble. And that's why he spends all his time putting out these cheesy gaslighting videos, because they know they're in trouble. And the RCMP, I'm not putting a lot of stake in that, guys. I'm sorry. I think we got to beat this government at the polls. But I got to tell you, they know they're in trouble, because you don't need to spend that much time telling people how great it is. It's happening here. Somebody made a mock of that happening here ad that they spent all our money on, that stupid ad. And they tried to shut them down. They know they're in trouble. So the important thing is, where do people focus? What can the best gains be made on? As I said, watch what Mike Schreiner has to say about agitating and getting engaged. But let me just end with you on this, Keith. Any other scandals that we missed in our scandal panel this time? Because I feel like there's always some I'm not getting to. The Science Center going to Kinga Therma. I mean, what else is out there? Help me.
Well, there was another sole source contract to a big American company, a $1 million contract to PwC, which I believe used to be PricewaterhouseCoopers. How did Waterhouse get down to the small W? What happened there? Anyway, a $1 million contract for IT stuff for the landlord-tenant tribunal. Governments and IT contracts. I should have went into IT 40 years ago, I'm telling you, because I'd still be making money off the e-health thing, which still isn't complete. Right. This was $1 million contract. It's now ballooned to $26 million. And of course, it balloons because, and Mark will know this full well, it's the government keeps changing the parameters of what they want done and what it can do and all this. They thought they were buying something off the shelf that worked in BC. It clearly didn't work out. There was $1 million in BC. It's 26 million, and it's going to go much higher. Why, again, a single source contract? Does the government not have any IT people of their own that can?
They do, but if you can get away with it, and before somebody who's conservative's head blows off their shoulders, I'm just as pissed about the news on ArriveCam and that giant scam.
Absolutely.
I mean, so this is not partisan. This is just fucking bullshit. Sorry.
The federal payroll system, the Phoenix system, was it 7-8 years now? How many hundreds of millions of dollars? They still can't pay their people properly. For God's sakes, governments and IT contracts. It's just a disaster. Anytime you hear about, reporters are just, all right, what are you doing this time? Because it's going to be a story, because they screw up every single one. And they don't know how to manage IT contracts. They clearly don't.
Because they don't know the IT. They don't know the IT.
At one time, I think it was the Orange Committee hearings where they had the head of the IT from Orange in at the committee hearings. And he basically said, they asked him about this, and they said, I don't know how to do that. Like he wasn't a computer expert.
Right. But I have to say this, as I don't take government contracts. They've tried to write them up for me at times here and there, because it is just a giant swill of garbage. But I will say this, that, oftentimes it's about outsourcing expertise they just don't have and they can't stay current on and they can't hire for in the civil service. And there are times when you need that kind of stuff. But there is also a giant game that is played between buddies who are on the outside private sector and guys who have access to the purse on the inside. And that game's been going on as long as time. What we need to do, though, is watch it, call it out, and try to stop it wherever we see it. But I just want to talk about a sole source contract that had nothing to do with expertise. Absolute grift. And that was the Staples Canada thing. I mean, you had small business owners having their locations shut down for Service Ontario to go to a Ford donor pal who runs Staples, and then to use our millions to retrofit this American hedge fund-owned company, and then have them have the audacity to come out and say, oh, you know what, we're saving money on what we used to have to pay for the Service Ontario in terms of leasing costs. And then the Service Ontario people are like, hells no, that's not true. So this is what I mean about the Overton window moving, right? Even people who voted for Ford are like, no, you don't get to put my family out of business and then lie about it. Go ahead, Keith.
That was it. I mean, you summed it right up there. I
I
mean,
have a theory. Let me just give theory on Staples. I was looking at some of their financial information after the announcement was made, and they were clearly struggling in Canada. They're clearly struggling as a retailer. And I think you see retailers like the body shops closing a bunch of locations now
Yeah.
too. And I couldn't help but think, one of the things that the government would hate to see is this departure of large scale retail because these are anchor tenants in big, huge malls. So I can't help but feel like, for a donor, probably, ruminating about having to potentially leave the Ontario market. The Ford government said, look, we'll give you a little service center kind of deal to kind of keep this help, bring stuff. I feel like that these things are connected because big retail is in trouble everywhere, right? Because of online shopping and stuff like that. So that was I just happened to notice the
See, I don't
Staples financials were a little rough.
oh, they're
I
more
don't
than a little rough. They're in big trouble. And they announced layoffs after they got
I,
the
right,
Ontario
yeah.
contract. They announced layoffs in Canada.
They
right,
So
laid
what
off
does that tell you? This,
Canadians. They laid off Canadians with our tax dollars. If that doesn't make
yeah,
you go cocoa banana cakes, people watching, I don't know what will. It is so corrupt like just in terms of the corruption doesn't necessarily mean illegal. It can mean lying. It can mean a whole bunch of different things. But the whole point, Mark, that you're making, okay, so I used to run a chamber of commerce. I understand a business, a major stakeholder in your community says, we might have to pull up stakes. You kind of scramble the jets and say, what can we possibly do to keep them?
right.
What incentive I mean, that's business. That's how it
Yep,
works.
yep,
But it's the sole sourcing of it. It's the fact that
right,
they're a donor. It's the fact that this was not a broader discussion around how to save these big box stores that are all suffering. This was about a pal wanted some cash, allegedly, whatever that discussion was, and they got it. And then they let go of Canadian workers. I mean, we're not making this shit up. This is on the public
it's the
record.
same big box stores that were allowed to stay open during the pandemic. The same
Right.
guys that were given all the breaks all
right,
along when the little guys were pushed down. And again, that just
right.
repeats this theme. The government claims to be for the little guy, and it's just not. It's always putting the big guy ahead of the everyday person.
Good point. Good point. Well, gentlemen, last thoughts. I don't know when we'll have you on another scandal panel. God knows with Ford and his fire hose, it'll be soon. But any last thoughts you want to leave? What should we be watching for, prioritizing for? To your point, Mark, not getting distracted about and keeping our eye on the prize. What is that?
Well, I think this omnibus bill that they're pushing through right now is something that we all should be mindful of what it really needs. I think many people are thought that the Greenbelt thing is over, that the municipal land boundary fight is over. I think we're about to see that it's only just begun, and I think everybody needs to refuel the jets and get ready because we're going to need to be called to action again to fight the fight that we thought we just won. So stay tuned.
I long for the day when being in Ontario meant you could have a job and a family and a social life and some recreational interests, pay attention to government, but not spend every bloody day fighting them. Keith, what should we be focusing on from a scandal perspective in your mind?
I think healthcare and long-term care both, and community care, I guess, because it's all really one system that should be one system.
Yeah.
This government is pushing and pushing very hard to allow not just more private delivery, but more private access all the way along. And we've already seen upselling. We're already seeing extra charges. We're seeing charges from these practitioner clinics for things that should be covered by your OHIP card. And of course, we know there are people who are only too willing to pay a little bit more to
Yep.
jump the queue because they can afford to do that. Well, that's not what the Canadian Health Act is all about. It's about equal access to everyone, regardless of how much money you've got in that wallet. You want to spend money in your wallet to get better access to healthcare? Cross the border, go south, pay your way. But here, no, we don't do that. And yet this is what this government is allowing. So I think we need a real close eye on this. Keep a close eye on the long-term care, these new beds. Are they going to be able to, meet the needs of the community? Are they just replacing old units that are already there? Are we meeting the actual needs? And community care, it's just not there. There's no coordination of the community care. So people are coming out of hospital or coming out and they have nowhere else to go. They should have home care and they're just not getting it. So I think we're going to see more scandals there. And I think we're going to see more and more efforts by this government to help their buddies cash in on the obviously very, very lucrative healthcare system.
Well, you create a crisis, you break it, you create a crisis, and then you come up with the way to fix it, but it always benefits the person who broke it, right? So, I mean, it is all rigged, it all sucks, we're all familiar with it. And you know what? It is in creating that two-tier system where the rich are successful. This is why listen, I have no problem. I do well. I think we all do well. We've had careers, we're white
Yep.
collar in what we do. I mean, we've had privilege and we've had success, and we continue to. When governments come in where they're trying to make it a different level of experience and livability if you're wealthy, uh, who's getting crushed by that model? The most vulnerable, the most marginalized, the tens of thousands in our country who are literally living in their cars and on the streets. We had somebody on the Oshow, you should all check it out, Angela Voss. She's the one doing the protest in front of City Hall right now for the parking, against the parking. There's a community of people who are at high risk, right off the street corners, living there. I've met them. And I got to tell you, it's not just this philosophical thing of there in Canada, we should have fairness. And in Canada, we shouldn't have two-tier systems. And in Canada, we shouldn't just favor the wealthy. It is absolutely a boot on the throat of people who are marginalized, it is brutal. So we have policies that are brutal. And we have to ask ourselves, do we want leadership in this country, federally, provincially, locally, that are willing to brutalize the marginalized, right? That's a question we're all going to have to start asking more and more often. Thank you guys so much for being on the Scandal Panel and for answering the bat signal. I was getting so many people going, Scandal Panel, Scandal Panel. I put out the bat signal. You guys responded. Take care of yourselves. Don't give up the fight. And to Mark Cripps's point, refuel, because we're going to need to. And of course, all of you watching, subscribe. It makes it easier for us to get the great content to you, and check out our special on the Hamilton Parking Over People scandal that's coming out this Wednesday. Take care, guys.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call of the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow.